we thought that this was a very good opportunity to really look at the results of two of our recently finished research activities, one of which was focused entirely on Central Europe and the Interreg program area, and another smaller, more case study focused activity that looked at Slovakia and employment dynamics there, the status of the development of knowledge economy and socioeconomic development patterns. So since, as I said, both are really looking at Central Europe, or one Central European country in particular, we wanted to get the relevant people that were engaged in that work together to allow for an exchange, to allow for discussion between the researchers on the one hand, who did the field work, who conducted the research, and our stakeholders that were involved, policymakers that were involved in various workshops or just providing information and giving feedback, and contributing also in that role and function to the success of that research work. So we organized this workshop in mainly 3 slots, really. So in the first instance, we're going to look at the concrete project results from the Sea Flows project that Davide Fina is going to talk about. We're going to learn then more about a specific case study on Slovakia concerning the employment dynamics there that Martin Guzzi will present to us. The entire event is moderated by our dear colleague Monika Schöner-Klegrasser from the Interreg Central Europe Secretariat. Monika will say a bit more about why she is here and why she was involved in the Sea Flows project. And then in a second slot, we will then ask for the reaction of policymakers and stakeholders in Central Europe. And here we have Lubika Rodzikova from the Ministry of Labour, Social Affairs and Family from the Slovak Republic. We have Andrea Reiner-Czerowska from the Austrian Conference on Spatial Planning. And we have Lily from Hungary, who is both actually in the monitoring committee of the Central Europe program, but also in the ESPON monitoring committee. And with that, I would actually now leave the floor to Monika to get the session started, and hope we're going to have good discussions and interaction with everyone involved here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michaela, for this introduction, and a very good afternoon also from my side. As I was already introduced by Michaela, my name is Monika Schöner-Klegrasser. I'm heading the Evaluation and Monitoring Unit of the Interreg Central Europe program. And it's really a pleasure to moderate today this workshop, since this study of sea flows is a very important one for our program. It has been actually initiated by the program and our stakeholders, with mainly the objective that we can use the results of this study both for the programming of the future 2021 to 27 program, but not also for that, for transnational cooperation, but also our stakeholders at member state level are very much interested to use the results also for various cross-border programs or also at national and regional level. This study has already been going on for about 1 year, and we are very grateful also for ESPON for supporting this. And it has been a really challenging exercise because it's something very novel to look into these dynamic flows. And in addition, there was also the COVID crisis, as you all know, which had also other additional implications. And also these aspects were kindly taken up by the experts. This study was actually addressing several thematic fields, such as all the economic interactions, flows of people, environment, and also accessibility and connectivity. And today we will mainly focus on the topic of employment. And unfortunately, this workshop is very short. We have 1 hour only. So this means we really should keep it brief and to the point, but still there will be some time for questions and discussion. And I think we could even spend quite some hours for talking, but yeah. And with this, I hand over to the expert presentations. First by David Fina, who has been coordinating the study, and he's working for VVA. And then afterwards, Martin Wutzi, as already was announced by Michaela from Slovakia, who has been doing the case study on Slovakia, and he's working for the university for the Masaryk University in the Czech Republic, and is also a researcher at the Central European Labour Studies Institute on Slovakia. So please, David, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Monica and Michaela, for the introduction and for setting the context. And good afternoon, everyone, from my side. Also, on behalf of the CE Flows Consortium, we really share the pleasure of being here today. It's really a great opportunity to be here to present these findings. And as you just said, Monica, of course, these are just this is just a very tailored and small selection for today. I will try to bore you as less as possible and to give also time for your feedback and for your discussion afterwards. Of course, if you feel any curiosity towards the other full content of the report, we are happy to stay in touch after the workshop to share additional information. So maybe if we move to the next slide, I will just give you a very brief overview of the terminology that I'm going to present in quantitative analysis techniques to address spatial dynamics in Central Europe, meaning that we range from econometric analysis to identify what we call untapped potentials, and I'm going to be more precise in a few minutes about it, and also to design some scenarios for the future development of Central Europe, also trying to take into account the impact of the pandemic, and there was really an element of novelty and a great challenge, as also said by Monica, across this study. But also, you will see there are a lot of data visualization techniques and mapping implied in this study, with cluster analysis to identify common patterns and discrepancies across the regions in Central Europe based on environmental, economic, and social indicators. And last but not least, there is a huge part of the report which is dedicated to the analysis of transnational cooperation models and programs and the frequency of this interaction across Central Europe. And this was then, let's say, feed hopefully in some satisfying policy option and recommendation that we'll try to briefly sketch also today. So if we move to the next slide, I will start with the first part of the presentation on economic interaction and development potential. So also we can go to the next one. Thanks a lot. And what we see in this first visual today is this map on research and development flows in Central Europe. And as you can see from this cluster analysis, or even immediately from a visual point of view, there are basically, there is quite some divide between some more western regions within Central Europe and more eastern, and the regions colored in orange, including also Slovakia, besides the region of Bratislava, which is in green. The region colored in orange and in yellow are characterized by lower employment in ICT industries and innovation output, and also a lower level of R&D expenditure, both from public and private sector, compared to the western part of the region. This means that what we found is that there are some disparities in terms of human capital, skilled human capital qualified in ICT industries, and this is and we observe phenomenon of migration that I think Martin is going to describe much more in detail later in this presentation, where skilled researchers also from Slovakia tend to emigrate to the western regions within Central Europe, mostly to Germany and also to northern Italy, which is a significant innovation hub, but also to the northwest of Europe, like Rhineland or Benelux, because these regions are very attractive in terms of innovation output and R&D expenditure. And as you can see from this map, the result that we can see from this picture is that besides the level of innovation output, which is basically based on the regional innovation scoreboard by the European Commission. You can also see there are these blue lines which represent the intensity of cooperation projects between regions, and these are much more concentrated in the western part of the region. Now, I see there is a hand raised. I don't know. Now I'm asking mostly Michael and Monica. How do we want to deal with questions? Do we want to maybe have a Q&A session at the end? Because otherwise, I think it will be a little bit complicated to yeah. Okay, that's fine. We're going to take questions on board later, and if you move to the next slide, the impact, let's say, of this lack of integration in R&D networks across Central Europe is reflected in what we identified as the untapped potential in innovation. So basically, what we call as untapped potentials are a set of indicators that could be economic, social, or environmental that are equal to, let's say, the regional asset of certain region in Central Europe, and for several reasons that could be, I don't know, geographical barrier, administrative barrier, economic barriers, they are not fully exploited. And this result is this map is the result of an econometric analysis. And what you can see in the map is basically an estimation, an estimate in terms of GDP loss for each region in Central Europe due to the lack of exploitation of certain factors. In this case, we are looking at innovation. And our estimate is that innovation is not fully exploited, and each year Central Europe loses around 1.34% of the GDP of the entire area. Linked to degree of innovation, it is closely linked the level of manufacturing specialization, and manufacturing has really a paramount role in Central Europe, as according to data from Eurostat, it accounts for 68% of the whole value added in manufacturing in the whole EU 27. And if you move to the next slide, we can see that also manufacturing features is characterized by lack of integration between regions and represents an untapped potential according to our analysis. And the main reason for this lack of integration in terms of manufacturing hubs between across Central Europe is mostly equal to the lack of transport infrastructure. There is not full interoperability between Western and Eastern hubs within the regions, and especially this applies to the railway sector. The result is that, as you can see in the red part of this map, there are certain areas which are more impacted by untapped potentials in manufacturing, and among these also we can mention Slovakia. And according to our analysis, which of course is an econometric analysis, a very rough quantitative estimate, we estimated a 1.58% of GDP loss per year due to let's say, well-functioning links in manufacturing. Then we can move to the next slide, and I think that actually this one that you will see in a few seconds on demography and migration, we can also skip it, and we can keep it for let's say a deeper focus on Slovakia later in the presentation. And maybe we can move directly to the two slides on the scenarios, because it is really, I think, one of the elements of greatest novelty of this study. And so basically what we try to do in our research is to model 3 different scenarios of what will be the future integration of Central Europe in 2030. So basically we have 3 scenarios. The first one, which roughly amount to the situation last year at the beginning of the pandemic, and is called the new normality scenario. So basically with the macroeconomic conditions that were more or less existing 1 year ago. And then we model 2 different scenarios called integration and partial integration, depending basically on the level of success of the integration of economic, social, and environmental activities in Central Europe, and depending on the likelihood that COVID, in the partial integration scenario case, will be slowing the integration process and will have a more persisting, unfortunately, effect that we hope is not going to happen. So maybe if we move to the following slide, we can start to look at the first map, which is let's say the good one, the integration scenario, and hopefully a scenario of economic recovery, which is significantly fostered by the result and the fund of the Next Generation EU that is going to be implemented across each member state in Europe. And what we see in our analysis is that the regions that are at the border between countries in Central Europe are the ones that are supposed to gain the most from, in terms of, we are talking of GDP growth rate, and again is a very rough estimate, but they are supposed to be the one gaining the most in terms of future integration in the area. And these regions are really matching what I was mentioning a few seconds ago about manufacturing activities, because the areas where hotspots of manufacturing activities are located are also the ones that in our analysis are supposed to benefit strongly from better integration in transport, from an environmental point of view, and from economic activities. And this can be also seen in this map in Slovakia, because in the western and eastern part of the region, we expect in our analysis a quite significant GDP growth rate, while interestingly enough, metropolitan and large cities that will also benefit, of course, from economic recovery from the pandemic, but they seem to gain relatively less compared to border areas in Central Europe. And if we go to the next slide, we go to the bad map, the partial integration scenario, where in this case the effort to improve integration processes at each level after the pandemic will not be as successful and as in the previous scenario. And the result is that, again, the areas which are very linked to manufacturing hubs will suffer and experience the highest losses. And focusing on Slovakia in this case, in particular the region of Košice will be the one, according to our analysis, experiencing a higher GDP loss compared to other parts of the country and other regions in Central Europe. Maybe we can move also to the following slide, and we can discuss a little bit what are our, let's say, key options for transnational cooperation that we came up with to try to address some of these issues. And again, as I was mentioning at the beginning, of course, these are some options that we are presenting today, looking at economic interactions and labor dynamic and employment. And these, let's say, do not encompass the full recommendation that we let's say designed for other thematic fields of this project. But among the most important, for sure, overall, there is the need to improve and boost once more knowledge sharing and technology transfer on innovation, and this strongly links to also the administrative requirement for companies to apply and participate in transnational cooperation programs. It will be very, very essential to boost human capital and technical support to SMEs, especially, as I was saying at the beginning, in the eastern regions of Central Europe, which right now are underperforming compared to other Western regions in this functional area. And an important element to mention is the fact that when stakeholders participate to innovation processes, there are, of course, different objectives between universities and companies. For example, in terms of the outcomes, the desired outcomes that these stakeholders want to achieve with the fruit of their research, and this means that it should be really essential to facilitate differentiated, for example, tender requirements for universities and SMEs, meaning that the tender requirements need to be aware of the need of these different types of stakeholder, and maybe not being a little bit too standardized. And also, it will be a winning formula when cooperation takes place not only between companies and companies or research centers, and universities, but when there is a mixture and exchange, a spillover effect between universities and companies, and let's say exchanging the outcome of innovative processes with different objectives. And maybe I will spend also 2 final words on another important economic sector, not only for Central Europe, but for the whole EU, which is tourism, and that unfortunately is one of the sectors that we know has been most severely impacted by the pandemic in this year and a half. And however, there are also some learning experiences and some good selling point that we can learn from this experience. And for example, there was a renovated interest towards domestic tourism, also facilitated, of course, by the restrictions on international travels. And what we saw in our analysis is that it will be really important to promote and boost even more those destinations that are not, let's say, very important and very established touristic hubs, but maybe trying to focus on the so-called destination image, trying to focus on the promotion of niche activities or very specific areas of local interest for certain destination. And maybe I can also mention an example of a success story from Slovakia that we analyzed in our study. And this was in this case it was a project funded by Interreg Europe, and it is called like Lettered Initiative. And basically, what this initiative did was an activity of promotion of renovated rural castle in the Prešov region in Slovakia. And it is really an interesting initiative in our view in terms of creating a communication strategy, a winning one, around this small destination, and also leveraging on digital tourism, digital opportunities using apps and localization activities to foster this type of tourism in these destinations.
Martin, anyway, I would like to ask you to come to an end. Yeah, otherwise we are running out of time.
Yes, exactly. I was in any case finishing now, and I wanted to leave the floor to Martin now. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, David. I saw that we have one question, but I would rather like to hand over to the next presenter, to Martin, and to collect then maybe after both presentations some questions so that we can answer them jointly. So Martin, please, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I will introduce the short report that was created based on the ESPON Employ project headed by the Institute for Social Research based in Milan. This report was created on a request of Slovak Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. And in this short presentation over 10 minutes, I will introduce the main challenges that we identify and discuss in this report. So in the next slide, I show the labor supply development of the Slovak labor market. The population of Slovakia is still young relative to the EU average, but it's one of the that is projected to get old very fast. So the current median age of the Slovak population is 41 years, but it is projected to increase by 8 years by 2050. The EU 27 median age is projected to increase by half of that. So Slovakia is aging faster than the rest of the Europe. You see in the graph that around 2015, the inflow of young people, the graduates of universities and around their 20s, start to decline sharply. This is because the previous generation postponed the childbearing responsibilities. The fertility rate around early 2000 was very low, and now 20 years later, we see that this generation is very small. So as a result, we have the shrinking labor force in Slovakia that is projected and will last until 2030. So this will lead eventually to the higher labor shortages. Slovakia is also a country that is not very popular by immigration. Only recently, over the last 6 years, the migrant population, the population of foreign-born, has doubled, but currently it comprises less than 3% of the population. So it's still very small compared to the other countries in the EU. The recent immigration includes the younger workers who come to Slovakia to help the manufacturing jobs that already fill the shortages. So most of the recent immigration are the people between 16 and 24 years old. Okay, in the next slide, I demonstrate the dynamics, the immigration and emigration. So if anything, the Slovakia historically was and also currently is the country of where people emigrate for jobs and very recently also for studies. So young people increasingly seek their university education abroad. After Luxembourg, Slovakia is the second country with the largest population of students, university students studying abroad. Most of the Slovak take the opportunity to study in the Czech Republic, where Czech universities have very good reputation. So you see that the emigration used to exceed the immigration actually. And 2017 was the first year when more people immigrated than emigrated. So this sort of stopped the negative position. Most of these Slovak people who study abroad, some of them find a job abroad, but eventually when they reach when they have the family, they return back. And it's very interesting to see how they locate upon the return to Slovakia. So I present the two pictures of the maps of Slovakia. On the left, you see the darker areas indicate the geographic areas where immigrating Slovaks, so returning Slovak people from abroad, locate. And those are the mostly regions when they eventually left their homes. So those are mostly the eastern parts of the country and also the southern. Whereas on the right, you see the regions where immigrating workers, so those young population to fill the labor shortages are located, and those are mostly the western parts of the country that have a lot of manufacturing opportunities and international companies offering mostly manual types of jobs. So on the next slide, I want to summarize that the Slovak economy is heavily based on manufacturing industry more than other EU countries. Slovakia is also among 20 countries with the highest robot density in manufacturing industry. OECD studies point to the one challenge is the job automatization that will occur in Slovakia. So many people presumably in manufacturing industry will lose the job. So manufacturing industry is heavily automatized or is going to be, but this is in contrast with the digitalization of probably the public sector that when measured by DESI index, Digital Economy and Society Index, constructed by European Commission, Slovakia lags behind in this digital connectivity, digital skills, digital public services, etc. So this is one area where Slovakia has to increase the efforts to implement these e-government services and public services. Also, the problem is that the adult population lags behind the high computer skills. So in the comparison on the bottom in the table, you see that more than 1/3 of Slovak adult population has no computer experience, and around only 1/4 has advanced computer skills, which puts Slovakia in the bottom tercile of the OECD countries. The quality of the labor force is increasingly cited as a barrier in entrepreneur surveys. So in this report, we point our attention to one of the recommendations is like the government to support the lifelong education, increase the SMEs' motivation to create ICT intense jobs, and to increase the funding in education. In comparison, we show that the education sector is heavily underfinanced, particularly the university or tertiary education is underfinanced compared to the neighboring countries and also the EU countries. In the next slide, I point to some differences that arise during the COVID-19 pandemic. So as many other countries, the businesses were closed, the school was closed, and many companies were forced to implement the teleworking practices. Slovakia is, since it is heavily based on manufacturing industry, this is very difficult to telework or to do from home. So in a table below, you have summary of some indicators that demonstrate the situation in Slovakia. So approximately 29% of jobs could be performed from home in Slovakia, which is below the EU average. Also, Slovakia, in general, Slovak workers use less often the ICT at work, the computers and technology at work. Before the pandemic, only 10% of workers had some experience with working from home. During the pandemic, 30% of workers started to telework. And this remained roughly the constant during the summer of 2020. So this is probably one of the limitations that having the manufacturing-oriented economy prevents a high share of people to work from home. There are differences between regions. Bratislava accumulates a lot of creative ICT-intense jobs, and roughly half of the jobs in Bratislava could be performed through teleworking. The share is much lower in other regions. So we have these regional differences that were also visible in the previous presentation in the graphs. In a final slide that I prepared, I present some concluding remarks. So before the COVID pandemic, the Slovakia actually encountered the positive growth. The unemployment rate was decreasing. The COVID pandemic came as a surprise and reverted these positive economic developments. As the Slovak economy is export-oriented, it's very vulnerable to these shocks. We see, looking at the data from Job Portal, we see that compared to the 2019, there was a decrease by 25% in the posted job opportunities. The good news probably for the state administration is that there was increase in demand for job vacancies in the public sector. So the public sector could select from the larger pool of the quality candidates. Surprisingly, this came as a surprise information was that more businesses opened during 2020 than number of businesses that were that closed down. So this was explained by that many businesses, they had sort of buffers, the revenues that they accumulated during the good times, and they could use these savings and they decreased investment, but survived. So that's very good news. Eventually, there was a lot of problems identified in the education system, where 7% of students were left without any education because of the missing equipment or the bad internet connection. Other students could not receive the quality education because of the lack of digital skills of the teachers. So those are the big challenges in the education sector that Slovakia has to deal with. The pandemic potentially will force more companies to go digital, go online, and this creates opportunities for Slovak government to improve the workers' digital competencies and skills. I finish here, and we could move to Q&A section there to discuss some aspects more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you to both speakers. So I think we have maybe time for 1 or 2 questions, and then we move over to the stakeholders' feedback. I saw that Marcella raised her hand before, so please ask your question, Marcella, or your comment. Marcella, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Good afternoon, all. Yes, I am very interested in CFLOs, the next one scenarios, because I believe in functional area, and I think that is an approach useful in post-COVID pandemic situation, because we must focus on opportunities and also to improve links, economic links, and also job for young people. So in the other hand, there is the important study to demographic change, but also the dynamic of employment is in COVID pandemic situation are important to discover and analyze in order to every member state can have some evidence in your country and compare with country nearby, neighborhood, and with a vision to go beyond the boundaries and focus on the principal focus topic that are better life, better job, and young people opportunities. So good work. I'm in Lombardy region and have a pandemic situation, very, very, very strong and stress people. So I know very well that we must work all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella, for this statement. I think it's more a statement than actually a question. Is there any other feedback or question which you would like to ask now to the experts? Since we are running a little bit out of time, if not, I would hand over to our stakeholders who have kindly agreed just to present a little bit their point of view, why they think that these studies are useful and important also for their institutions and at national and regional level. So first, I would like to start with Lubika Ruzikova from the Ministry of Labor, Social Affairs and Family in Slovakia. So we have about maximum 5 minutes for each intervention. Please go ahead, Lubika.
Yes, hello. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to this webinar. I am aware that we are running out of time, so I will try to be brief. So my name is Lubica Ružičková. I work at the Ministry of Labor, Social Affairs and Family of Slovak Republic, and I'm here to say a couple of words on the project Employ Slovakia covered by ESPON. The case study Employ Slovakia arose from cooperation among the relevant departments of the Ministry of Transport and Construction of Slovak Republic and Ministry of Labor, Social Affairs and Family of Slovak Republic. Based on the established cooperation with ESPON, we have gained very valuable findings which have been or will be incorporated into two important national documents. The starting document for the elaboration was the strategic document for the area of employment in Slovakia, specifically National Employment Strategy of Slovak Republic until 2020. The key objective of the assignment was to have an expert, external, independent assessment of the implementation period of the National Employment Strategy, so that the independent view of experts complements or expands the framework of regular evaluation of this document. In this context, we consider the key goal to be met. Particularly beneficial are the dynamics of the job creation associated with the knowledge economy, the development of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a view of the lack of skills, the geographical and demographic framework, specific implement issues, etc. The findings anchored in the study adequately complete the evaluation framework of our National Employment Strategy and also contains of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic with relevant references. Another goal of our assignment was to identify key employment problems in Slovak Republic in the period under review, compiled by independent supranational and national experts, as well as outline of conclusions and recommendations for Slovakia for the next strategic period. The study reflects the current situation in the country and helps to identify the challenges for implementing policies in order to avoid middle-income traps, policies to improve the overall innovation environment, and to improve the skills and adaptability of the workforce to the new trends in digitalization and automation technologies. It also underlines the need to focus priorities on internal innovation, research and development activities developed by small and medium-sized enterprises, on support for lifelong learning, on policies to facilitate the return of Slovaks living abroad, and to tackle insufficient level of qualified immigration. Findings anchored in the case study identified key issues, conclusions, and recommendations, and will be incorporated into the national document on employment for the next period, entitled Strategic Priorities for Employment Development in Slovak Republic until 2027. This document will serve as the main guideline in terms of employment strategy and policies in Slovakia for the coming period. The other important national document into which this study has been reflected is nothing less than Recovery and Resilience Plan. Considering the human potential as one of the main keys for economic growth and territorial development, the strategic intention of Ministry of Labour is to ensure that Slovakia has human capital that is sufficiently prepared to meet the requirements of the economy of the 21st century, including the requirements of territorial development. Although Slovakia has a relatively small share of early school leavers compared to the EU average, a high number of people with at least secondary education, a relatively high score in OECD International Adult Skills Testing, and a significant increase in the share of university graduates, it also has a growing share of students studying at universities abroad and the consequent brain drain, which is one of the highest in the EU. In addition, the proportion of people and jobs affected by automatization is highest among OECD countries, and the proportion of people participating in lifelong learning that could help to reduce the effects of automatization is one of the lowest in the EU. Because the benefits of return migration for the economy are considerable, the government of Slovak Republic has taken measures to attract more Slovak citizens to bring them back to the Slovak labor market. Slovak government also included this task into Recovery and Resilience Plan. In connection with the implementation of this document, the Minister of Labour also applied the recommendations and conclusions of the ESPON case study. The main challenge for Slovak Republic is therefore to break out off the middle income trap and to restart the convergence process. This process should be based on increasing human capital and creating an innovative environment that will strengthen the competitiveness of Slovak Republic in activities, especially with higher added value. Just to conclude, the ESPON study adequately responded to our expectations and predefined needs. It also includes the aspects of COVID-19 crisis with relevant recommendations and has multifunctional use in Slovakia in order to identify and tackle the main issues to help to recover from pandemic and to secure the transition to more digital economy. Well, I think I will stop here to leave some space to the other stakeholders, but I would like to thank once more to all the experts and participants to this study for a great job they have done. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ludwika, for this very positive feedback on both studies. And I think it's very good to hear that the results are useful. They are not just something to be written in a study to put on the shelf, but really something which can be used in practice. I think that's really important. And this is why I think there has been also a very high attempt to directly and actively involve the various stakeholders. And this leads then over to the feedback from the next stakeholder. So Ms. Andrea Reiner-Czerowska from Austria, from the Austrian Conference on Spatial Planning. She's one of the national contact points in the Interreg Central Europe program. So Andrea, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Monica. Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to say a few words about the project CE Flows, which I was closely following from the very, very beginning till the very end. And I have to say, and Davide, you also have shown it on your slides, the project has clearly drawn a very heterogeneous picture of the developments in our program area of Central Europe, and being all of them due to either economic, geographic, administrative or language barriers. And although cooperation in this functional area of Central Europe is going on for several years now, you have identified a big lack of integration still persisting. But by this, at the same time, you have also pointed out the untapped potentials that we as a program can work on in the next years. And this leads me to my second comment, that for us as a program of the Interreg family, the project came at the completely right time when programming the new era of Central Europe for the period of 2021 till 2027, because the results of the project CE Flows can be well used and integrated in our new program. Besides the territorial analysis that we also had which has been drawn by external experts for our program, and which is needed as a reference document for the programming. The ESPON project will help us mainly in the future to shape the calls for proposals and to react to the developments and the possible development scenarios. And we can provide by this project to the applicants a very good basis for their project ideas, with the well-elaborated data, which they can reflect in their planning to untap the potentials in our area. All in one, I would like to close my short statement that the project offers basically a valuable basis and data for further transnational, cross-border, national and regional activities, programs and initiatives. And as Monica has introduced myself, working as a national contact point in Austria for the Austrian Conference on Spatial Planning, which also accommodates the managing authority for the national ERDF program for investment and jobs, but also accommodates department which is dealing with Interreg cross-border programs. So even within our institution, we have the direct use of the project results, and we are also we have also a good possibility to distribute these results to different stakeholders on all levels, going from the national to the very, very local level. So thank you very much, Davide, and all the experts working on this project. And just a very last word on the study of Martin. Me personally, being an immigrant, a Slovak immigrant, that was searching for a university study in Austria and stayed in Austria. Unfortunately or fortunately, how to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. So this brings really a good linkage to this study as well from a personal point of view, but also from a very professional one, since I know that you have been really very, very closely following the study. So thank you also for that. And last but not least, we have our monitoring committee member, both for the Interreg Central Europe program and the ESPAN program, Lili Gergelin-Cintalan. So she has been also actively participating in the study, as also a lot of other stakeholders from our program. So please, Lili, also please give a short statement from your point of view. So.
Very much, Monica, and good morning for everyone. I was also just reinforced what Andrea has just said some minutes before, that this CE Flows project was a very valuable input in our programming process while we were planning the future Interreg Central Europe program. And it came at a really good time. So we can use the findings at the shaping of our new program, and it also came a little bit later than our territorial analysis and the analysis of the joint challenges and opportunities of the Central Europe area, which was prepared before the COVID-19 crisis. So this way, with the CE Flows project, we could get some first reflections how the pandemic will affect and will change the situation in Central Europe. And I would like to highlight two findings or two aspects which was quite interesting for me in the study. The first one was the finding on the disparities of research and development capacities in Central Europe. It was very striking to see that how much you can see the former Iron Curtain in the map, where it shows the different clusters of R&D capacities in Central European regions, and it really reinforces that there is still a need for cooperation and to exploit the untapped potentials in this research and development aspect. And it was also very useful and interesting in the study that they just made a linkage between the untapped potentials and the need to connect also the more eastern regions of the Central European area to the innovation system and the demographic change and the brain drain, that we really have to tackle and address this issue in order to have a population retention force in the eastern part of this transnational region. And the second thing that I would like to highlight, and it was especially interesting for me, was the different scenarios, how we can imagine the Central European place in the next decades with the new normality, with a more intense cooperation and with less intense cooperation. I think it's a real threat that cooperation will a little bit slow down in the coming years, but I really hope that we can overcome these new obstacles coming with the COVID crisis. And it was also very interesting to see that not only the less developed regions of the Central European area are benefiting from integration and cooperation, but also the most developed part, like the manufacturing part in northern Italy and Germany, has a very great positive effect when transnational cooperation became more and more intense in the upcoming years. So it was especially good to see that this is for the good of every region of Central Europe. And I would right now just close my verse and thank you once again for the study and give a little bit opportunity for questions if we still have time for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily, also for your very positive remarks. I fully agree that Interreg Central Europe is characterized still by a lot of disparities, and there is still, I think, a lot of space or a lot of opportunity to do via cooperation. And we are actually very much looking forward to launch the new Interreg Central Europe program, where we will, of course, offer cooperation possibilities in different thematic fields. So there is now maybe still, even if it's already 2:30, still a few time for just a very few questions or comments by other participants of this workshop. So please feel free to raise your hand. I don't see any hand raised for the moment. If not, I would like to hand back to Espen, to Michaela, to say a few concluding remarks to this, I think, very interesting workshop. And I would thank you all for your participation and time and interest.
Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you, everyone, the speakers, and also our colleagues from ministries and the Austrian Conference on Spatial Planning for their contributions and their reactions to what we've heard from Davide and Martin. I think it was really an inspiring workshop, and it was a good opportunity, as I said in the beginning, to bring these two projects that were really, running by themselves without any linkages, but in a way showed us how they quite well actually fit together and interlink. It's a pity there is not a bit more time to maybe take more questions or just go into a bit more detail, because certainly there is much more that we could look at. But since we also have other workshops coming up, and some of you might even have enrolled for the next one, I wouldn't take much more of anyone's time, and would just like to thank everyone. So in particular, obviously, the speakers, and very warm thank you to Monica for taking up the role as moderator of this workshop. The presentations of Davide and Martin will all be put on our website, so you can find them there within the next few days. And you can also, if ever you want to go back, because we did web stream this workshop, you can also look it up again on the ESPON YouTube channel. Obviously, you can find the research reports also on our website. They are not there yet, but they will be soon. And yes, so with that, I would like to thank you all one more time, and would like to close this workshop and wish you still a very good afternoon. Thank you very much.